Hey guys, it's Jolene from Smith's Nature Friendly Farms. We are hanging out in the kitchen today, and today we're going to make cornmeal. Alright, this is another garden experiment for me this year, although this time it didn't take place in my garden, it actually took place in my father-in-law's garden. So he grew corn for me this year and then let it dry out on the stalk. So I have an entire bucket full of all this beautiful dried corn, and we're going to turn it into cornmeal, and that for me is the experiment. Cornmeal that is homemade tastes far better than cornmeal you buy in the store, and that really doesn't actually surprise me. Most of my vegetables that are grown in the garden taste better than the grocery store, but I had to try it for myself because I don't just take it for word, I actually need to experience it myself. So this is our first step in processing the cornmeal. I'm going to show you guys what I'm doing, and then how about we make something and test it out. So we grew a earth tone, glass gem, Jimmy red corn, and a bloody butcher, and I can't 100% confirm which is which. We do know, I'm pretty sure this is the bloody butcher and this is the Jimmy red corn, and I think this is the glass gem and this is the earth tone, but these two actually might be switched up. But the one thing that we did absolutely fine is any of these earth tone kind of glass gem ones, they had super small cobs. And they were all treated the same way. There's no change in how they were grown. Some of them were grown in a row right next to it, so it really was no different. But these, the bloody butcher and the Jimmy red corn were phenomenally better. They were bigger cobs, fuller cobs, and a beautiful corn for this. All right guys, our first step is actually to take the kernels off of the cob. And in order to do this, we're going to put it into a clean bowl because as you take kernels off, sometimes you discover the odd bug or two. So you want to make sure that you start out each round with a nice clean bowl. The hardest part is actually in starting, and then once you get started, it gets quite easy. So all I'm doing is pushing towards starting at the end down here and pulling and pushing at these kernels to get the start. You will find that you do get kernels everywhere. Maybe not everywhere, but you do pop a few out in the air, and then once you get them started, they're much easier to pull apart. In fact, I find it easier to pull sideways than it is to pull down on the cob, but pulling sideways on the kernels loosens it. Now, you can do it by hand. There's actually a tool that you can use that supposedly makes it easier. I'll put the link in the description down below. It's about $20 on Amazon, and it's like a ring and it goes over the top of it. For that one, I've never used it, so I can't say yay or nay whether it's good or not, but your hands do get sore if you're doing this a lot with a lot of cobs of corn over time. So I won't make you watch me do this entire one. I'm going to do about three things of corn and we'll come back. All right, I wanted to show you on this cob, I started the line down here, but just peeled them all the way down, and now this portion is much easier to do because I can do it on the side, and it goes so much faster doing it this way for some reason. All right, so we've got our bowl full of corn. It's beautiful. It's absolutely gorgeous. And it was pretty darn clean. It was a nice batch. So this is 3 cobs of corn. These are full cobs of corn that we emptied. And when we're done with this, we'll measure how much cornmeal we actually got out of 3 cobs of corn. All right, our next step is actually to grind the corn, and we're going to use a KitchenAid coffee grinder to do this. You can absolutely, if you have some high-tech equipment and you have a massive grinder, go for it. Some people have attachments for, say, their KitchenAid. We're doing a great advertising for KitchenAid. I promise you there's no revenue earning for this, but if you have a KitchenAid tool, utensil that adds on to your blender, it's something that you perhaps could do on that, but we're going to do it, I don't have that, so we're going to do it on a standard coffee grinder, and this is how I make all my dried peppers. So we don't want a great deal of corn in the grinder, about 2 small handfuls, because otherwise it has a hard time getting it ground up. It will end up really chunky, so you want a little bit less in your grinder at a time. Let's check. And it's still pretty chunky. And it all depends on what kind of grind you want. Give it a bit of a shake. The dust tends to build up at the bottom of the grinder, so you get really fine ground cornmeal at the bottom and then the chunky stuff at the top. So it's a little hard to get it unraveled. Oh, that's getting better. We're going to give another round. All right, and I'm going to do an extra step. I'm going to take this and put this onto my dehydrator. So you can see it here. It's all nice and ground up. It's still a bit chunky. If the chunky bothers you in, say, a recipe, you can soak it in some of the wet ingredients, i.e. if you've got milk or your buttermilk you're putting into it, you can definitely soak it and that'll reduce the crunchiness level of it if you don't like that. I personally quite like it. I always find I miss the crunchiness on regular cornmeal or store-bought cornmeal. So why am I putting it in a dehydrator? I just want an extra kill step. So a kill step is a process where you are ensuring that there's no moisture for mold and you're also killing off any chances of last minute bacteria or anything like that. So I'm going to put this in at minimally about 140 and just let it sit for about an hour to make sure it's extra dry. But before I do that, I'm going to ground up the rest of the corn and have this tray full. All right, so our 3 cobs of corn are in here, good to go, drying out. I definitely would not do too much in this. This feels quite warm. I haven't really done that many at a time. So you be careful with your machinery. You don't want to blow the motor out of your coffee bean grinder, whatever you're using. But here we are. Here's our cornmeal sitting in the thing, dehydrating, and we're going to let it go for 1 hour at 140 to 160 in that range. All right, so our cornmeal is done. And we have this big beautiful tray of nicely, perfectly dried and should have no troubles whatsoever. We're putting it in a separate bowl. And I said we would measure it up, so let's measure it up. I guess I didn't really need to put it in a bowl, but that's fine. I'm going to just put it over there to capture my mass. 3 cups of cornmeal that out of 3 cobs. So looks like you get about a cup of cornmeal per cob if you've got a large cob. So that's pretty good. So what we're going to do is you can store your cornmeal in just a plain old Ziploc bag. You want to keep it sealed. You want to keep any moisture from getting back into it. If you're giving it as gifts, this is actually kind of a neat way to do it, but you can get these bags. They're nice. They're on Amazon as well. I'll put it down below, but you can put them in nice little bags. You can put a little sticker and a label on it. If you're a farmer's market seller, by all means, probably a great thing to sell at the farmer's market. And when you think about it, if you only need one of these per cup, you actually don't need a ton of corn. So even if you have a small garden, you can actually do a fair bit of cornmeal on your own. So that's kind of neat. I really didn't have to have my father-in-law grow up, but he grew me quite a few tubs of it. So I'm going to be grinding corn for a long time. And then the last thing I recommend is get yourself some silicone packages. These guys help take up the moisture in a bag. The other option is put them in the freezer. Cornmeal can be frozen, and actually I highly recommend freezing flours and cornmeals. It helps kill any possibility of, sometimes bugs can have eggs in there, in your corn, in your flour seed, and freezing it for 7 days can help kill the eggs and make that so they can't come out a little bit later. So good thing to do if you can. So that is it, my friends. That is how I have made my cornmeal, and now to bake some and test it out. So I've actually made the cornmeal muffins out of the cornmeal that we've just made, and let me tell you, they are delicious. Super impressed with this. It's going to be very difficult to go back to regular cornmeal now. But let's take a look at them, and I'm also going to tell you about one extra step I'd add to the process now that I've made them. Okay, there's actually only 2 left in the batch. I had to take a couple to my neighbor to get a southerner's input on them and whether or not they were any good based on a southerner's taste buds, because as you guys know, these are Canadian taste buds here and they're a bit different. So they are approved by southerners. It is great tasting, they said. It is grittier, way grittier than regular cornmeal. The extra step I would add to the processing would be actually to sift it to remove any corn pieces that come out in a larger chunk. I really think there's a potential for some tooth damage or something to happen if somebody got a larger piece of corn, and I didn't realize that or didn't think of that until I got quite a ways through a couple of batches. Other than that, it is amazing, super delicious. Honestly, it is the best cornmeal I've ever had. All right, guys, if you have any comments, if you've made cornmeal in the past and you think I could be doing this a better way, love your comments. Give them to me down below. Otherwise, I'm very excited about my first batch of cornmeal. I'm going to put this one in the freezer for now. And that's it, you guys. Be friendly. Be kind.